Politics, as we know it, seems to lack the tools, the operating system, and the vision to address the global challenges that humanity is facing at the necessary speed and with the right priorities today. So if politics as usual is outdated, what's the alternative? Hello and welcome to Pioneers of Politics, a joint YouTube channel of the Institute for Integral Studies together with its LiFT Leadership for Transition Politics project. I am Elke Fein, Managing Director of IFES and the initiator of the LiFT project that I am coordinating together with my colleague Bettina Geiken. In this video, we would like to give you a brief introduction first to what we are doing in this project to explore and support new, more integral qualities of politics in Europe and beyond.
Yeah, and second, we would like to introduce our team, consisting of many wonderful colleagues from 7 partner organizations in 4 countries that have come together around the joint goal and purpose to midwife these new, more integral qualities of politics. Because in fact, one core feature of the new kind of politics as we see it is that it works on the basis of collective intelligence and wisdom of the multitude. And we are trying to implement this insight in our work too, trying to walk our talk as much as we can.
So just a few words about our work in LiFT Politics. Our action research activities, in a nutshell, focus on 3 research questions. First, what is the new paradigm, assuming that we need a whole new operating system, including an integral upgrade of structures and institutions, processes and practices, as well as attitudes and political culture. And our question is, what are the core elements and principles of this new paradigm? And second, where is it already showing up? We see many pioneering initiatives, groups and projects, and among them also political parties who already implement elements of this new paradigm. What are they doing and what can others learn from them? And third, how can we support this emerging new paradigm and political culture? What are tools, processes, and instruments that can help scaffold and facilitate new, more inclusive, more conscious ways of doing politics? And one way of making some of this visible and available to an interested audience is this Pioneers of Politics YouTube channel, along with a couple of online and other publications. And you find more information about these on our website and in the description below this video. Now over to you, Bettina.
So one way of supporting this emerging paradigm is a learning lab and interactive curriculum, which we invite you to participate in and about which we will talk about a little later in this video. But first of all, let me present Klara Sucher and Michael Wernstedt, who are in charge of this Learning Lab sub-project, and ask them briefly to introduce themselves and to share with us what has attracted you to LiFT and the idea of co-developing a more integral operating system for politics. So here's my question to you. Why do you think we need this today? Maybe Klara, if you would like to go.
Thanks. Yeah, so what has attracted me to contribute in LiFT is an understanding that in order to change society as we experience it today, we need to involve ourselves and as many other people as possible. And that also means that we need new ways of discussing and doing politics together. We need to transcend the idea that politics is only done in parties. And I believe that here in this project, we're really looking at that. We are discovering and also experimenting with other ways of engaging in the formation and the transformation of our society. And that's very exciting.
Thank you, and maybe I'll continue from that. So my name is Michael Wernstedt. and my background is really as a social entrepreneur, and I built an organization that empowers youth to make a difference. And we introduced in that organization something called TEAL, that we were self-organizing. Anyone could take any decision as long as they consulted the people that had expertise and that were concerned. And I saw how much energy that released and how much creativity and ownership. So when I heard about a party in Denmark called The Alternative that had done co-creative politics, they had invited people to co-create their political content. I thought, wow, they have done this on a national level. So I was a part of a group that started a sister party in Sweden to try to do this. And in that journey, I realized that it's very hard to do something so innovative in the current political system. And that's why when I heard about this project, that I thought this is something I have to do. Because here we're experimenting outside the political system with things that could probably be integrated in a political system or be foundations of a new political system. So that's really what attracted me and why I'm here.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And this already shows how each of those partners has, of course, something substantially to contribute to this emerging politics of the future. And that's the case in various roles, both in research and facilitation roles, and as pioneers in their own right themselves. And that's what you just referred to, Michael. And in fact, as you check out more videos on this channel, you will discover that Klara has also been in an interviewer role, and Michael is also a pioneer himself and is in an interviewee role later in this series. As a matter of fact, this dynamic process of role-taking, of flexible ways of cooperation and creative improvisation are a core feature of this project. We strive to be an agile team, so to speak, where each member is responsible to find their best place in view of making the most meaningful contribution to the overall goals of the project. And Klara and Michael are very good examples of this. So would you like to share a bit more about what's your role in the project? What's this learning lab about? And what is your vision for how this can support the emerging new paradigm of integral politics?
I think this has been really a treat to do this because we're working with so many amazing people that have so much insight, and we realized that rather than reinvent the wheel ourselves, we are very much coordinating what the other partners are doing in this project, to draw on what are the patterns for how to have dialogues. How can we think about us as individuals, and what impact can we have, and what can we learn from the pioneers, and so on and so forth. So we're really trying to gather all those insights, and also we have mapped out what the new features of new politics is, that we go deeper in ourselves and connect with ourselves and each other, that we go wider, that we include a lot of people, and this we are gathering to a curriculum that really maps out the features of new politics. And in that learning lab that we will have the summer of next year, 2022, we will explore this together, and obviously, since we want to have an approach that is reflecting the new political ideal, it will be very interactive, and I think everybody that's joined will also have a lot to contribute with. So we will build on both what we find and what everybody brings in the learning lab. Would you like to add something, Klara?
Yeah, sure. So what we discovered in our contribution to the project, Michael and I, is that for one thing, we are spending quite a lot of time understanding what's going on, diving in, mapping the different topics, the different themes and contents and actors in this field. And we would really like to make these learnings accessible for others. So part of what we are trying to do here is to map all our findings in a way that allows others who are also interested in this transformation of politics to kind of dive in quicker than we did, because we are taking some years for this, but we really hope that others will be able to find useful information and kind of be able to navigate in this system and all in all these topics much faster than we initially did. So that's kind of a service we really want to create for others. And the second part is, as Michael already said, that learning is really a very dynamic process, and it is connected to how we live our lives. So what we are looking at is to create formats here that are much more experience-based. It's not about writing down our learnings in just one text and people read it and then they have it, but learning is something dynamic. And that's also why we are really looking forward to this learning lab that will take place next summer, where people bring their experience, we bring our experience, and then from that meeting, new insights and new learnings again are being created. So it's not a process that can ever be finished, of course, and that's of course especially important for politics, where we need to create a system that is also self-learning and adapts to the challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you very much. So as Klara and Michael said, the Learning Lab will take place in the summer of 2022. And you're welcome to participate in this. So if you're interested, stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and you have a chance to be with us next year. Thanks a lot. So next, we're delighted to present two colleagues who each make a very specific and substantial contribution to the LiFT project. And we start with Bernard Leroux. He is our project partner in Gothenburg, Sweden, where he is doing dialogue and conflict mediation work. And a lot of that happens in local political contexts. And one thing that I find particularly valuable about this work that you're doing, especially from an integral politics perspective, is how you integrate what we could call the shadow dimension of any conflict. And you would probably call it deep democracy, I guess. So yeah, welcome, Bernard. And I guess it's best you introduce yourself. What would you say, how would you describe the essence of the work that you're doing, and how does it relate to LiFT? And in what sense would you say that a new transformative way of doing politics is needed in our times?
So my work focuses on social issues that are complex in nature and often have a dimension of tension or resistance or conflict. And we use dialogue as a way to see if it's possible for groups who are involved in social problems or social conflicts to speak together in order to find a better way forward. So these social conflicts or areas of tension often arise because political decisions are made or have been made in the past or need to be made in the future. And this more and more leads to some form of resistance amongst people who are affected by the decisions, particularly if they're made in a top-down way. So the dialogue work that we do is really focused on trying to include the people who are involved in the issues that we're dealing with to meet together and to think together in order to find a better way forward. And that's a huge challenge to a system which is organized in a hierarchical way, where people at the top make the decisions. So one really requires a mind shift, not only from the participants who belong to civil society, but also from those people who have the power to make decisions. And it's a challenge on many levels to get the right people into the room, to get them to speak about issues that are important to them, and to design a process like that. So that's where our focus is, and we work mainly in Sweden on a national, regional, and local government level. But a small part of the work also involves working with the government and local authorities in Colombia, where we are focusing on social conflicts after the peace accord there and a way to deal with those.
Yeah, I think that already gives a very nice insight into this new political culture that we're exploring in this project, and that we would like to see emerging and are already seeing emerging. And by the way, that also connects with two things that have been repeatedly voiced by the respondents of a survey that Klara and Michael have initiated as part of the LiFT project. And one thing is the importance of deeper qualities of dialogue. And the other thing is a need for more inclusive structures and containers that actually create the spaces for such dialogues to happen across all societal groups. And so that connects very well with the work that you do. So yeah, I wonder, could you maybe share a little bit more about how you're bringing this dimension of your work into the LiFT project, and what's your role there, what you're currently working on?
So when we have conversations with people on different levels, or when we facilitate those conversations, whether it's about a conflict or a planning issue or whatever, it is really important for that conversation not to simply remain on the surface. If we stick to surface issues and we stick to what people actually see happening from their limited perspective, we find that we don't really get to the essence of the problem. And so what is really important here is to be able to get people to speak on a level which is, if we want to call it that way, deeper than the surface level, not just about technical solutions to really difficult problems. So we can't, for example, resolve big complex issues by talking about changing rules or changing laws or making small adjustments. We actually have to get to understand the problem in depth. And in order to do that, people need to feel safe enough to speak about issues which are really important to them. They need to, for example, speak about ways in which they think when they are involved in the problem. They need to speak about emotions and feelings, what lies behind that, which memories are there, and possibly even about identity issues. And if we manage to get to that level in whatever part of the dialogue process, we find that potential emerges, which then helps us to find a way forward, which is not just a quick fix, which usually doesn't work very well with such complex problems and conflicts. So the focus in the LiFT project is to ask the question, what is the kind of conversation that is needed in the political context, but also in other contexts where important decisions are made? How can we understand the way that is needed in such conversations in a better way? And are there small parts which will help us when we design such a process that we need to take account of and that we need to incorporate in our design? Can we break that down to smaller parts so that we can actually give hands-on easily understandable advice to people who are finding themselves in difficult situations when it comes to having that kind of dialogue. To try and put together all these pieces, once we have identified the quality of conversation that we are looking for, we call them patterns, based on the idea of a pattern language, which Christopher Alexander, an architect, developed for building and for designing buildings. But it's equally applicable to designing a dialogue. So the end product that we hope to see here is a collection of such patterns or small usable pieces of advice, which will help people to reach that quality of conversation that we feel is needed when society is dealing with complex issues and complex conflicts.
Yes, and especially since one thing we can already say about this emerging new paradigm of doing politics at this point is that deep and generative listening, as Bernard is practicing it in his dialogue work, is a core skill in it. And again, Bernard is also both an active contributor to the project and a pioneer himself regarding his dialogue work. So there will be a longer interview with Bernard and his work on this channel very soon. Another colleague who is making a very specific, substantial contribution to the project is Katrin Muff from Lucerne in Switzerland, who is actually a founding member of the LiFT project since 2013, when she was the dean of the business school in Lausanne. So like myself, she has actually been with the LiFT project for the last 8 years. Wow, seems like a long time. But actually, we've known each other for even longer, dating back to the early days of a Swiss project called Integral Politics, which is both a party and a movement and tries to translate the integral vision into political practice. And Katrin, you've been quite active there for some time too, as I remember. So yeah, would you like to comment on those good old days and share your thoughts about what your relation with integral and politics is from where you're now?
Yes, I'd be happy to. First of all, it's a real privilege to still be a part of LiFT. It's been quite a journey for the last 8 years. We've come a long way. And of course, if you look back, I think what is even more interesting is how much the world has changed in these last 8 years. We're in a very different place, also in terms of democracy, than we were 8 years ago. Elke, where you and I met for Integral Politics, our hope was to improve the dialogue between what used to be left and right, to kind of come up with an integral approach to saying, hey, let's do what is right for the world, for society, beyond these divisions. And if I look back, you know, my God, what a timely vision that was. And how much more would it still be needed today? I don't know whether today we would still have the courage to actually launch such a vision. My concern for the polarization in the past 5 years in politics, in society in general, has really grown. So all the more work that we need to do, and all the more reason for why this project is now so important. And I'm really happy that we've shifted it from a general societal leadership approach towards a political approach.
Yes, those good old times, and times have changed, and now you're working as a professor of business sustainability at Louis Business School Rome, and as an independent consultant helping business clients, but also municipalities and local governments to navigate transformative changes and tapping into creative or co-creative potentials beyond what we call politics as usual. And this, of course, has a lot to do with what you're contributing to the LiFT project. So I wonder, would you like to say a bit about your work today?
Yes, with pleasure. And I hope it will contribute some nice nuggets of insights for hopefully some potential solutions of how to approach this increasing polarity that we've discussed before in democracy, both inside government, but also kind of in society. What I'm hoping to do with my contribution to LiFT is to outline, on one hand, kind of what are the challenges in a polarized society, to kind of look at what may be transferable insights from other fields. And there comes in my consulting and research work of the past years, including, of course, much of what we have done with LiFT before around the collaboratory, where we looked at how do we actually create effective multi-stakeholder spaces, what are limits and challenges for these, and how can we overcome these. There's some interesting research that has emerged from having studied the underlying needs for the mindset shifts to actually effectively collaborate as multi-stakeholders. And I will be doing my best to apply these insights from different fields to the political area, particularly around the mindset shift, for both for an individual, but also for a mindset shift what I find increasingly interesting for organizations or for teams. These face different challenges. If you, for example, if you translate that to how do different parties collaborate, you have additional challenges in addition to what an individual has who is facing another individual. And then hopefully I'm attempting to offer some solutions to find a new common ground so that governments and society can work better together, which goes back to the aspiration that we had, Elke, when we started adding our contributions and insights to the integral politics of Switzerland.
Yeah, great. And by the way, Katrin was also the one who at the very beginning of the LiFT project brought in this collaboratory method that we have spent quite a while during the first 2 LiFT projects on working with intensively in various contexts, various constellations, and so on. And so the interesting challenge in this project that Katrin has taken on is to adapt this format to political context. So looking forward to what comes out.
Thank you. Yes, me too. We're doing all, I'll be able to contribute the various case in points, I call them, of the experiences of the past years and experiences that are still going on actively currently right now, despite the COVID times. And I hope that they provide some interesting insights.
Yes, same here. Great to have you on board, Katrin.
Thanks for your continued trust and for the awesome collaboration. It's a great pleasure to be on board.
So next, we're talking to a couple of wonderful, inspiring women in our team, and we're very proud and happy to have Professor Karen O'Brien and Indra Adnan as team members. Karen is from the University of Oslo, where she is a leading researcher into the inner human and social dimensions of climate change, and whose idea of quantum social science shows how in a new paradigm of politics, each one of us immediately matters. And Indra is the co-founder and the co-coordinator of the movement and platform The Alternative UK, who is one very important pioneer of a new politics. And both of you bring in not only very thorough expertise and skill in areas that are crucial for our project, especially concerning personal and inner dimensions of large-scale change and transformation, but you're also great and easy and fun to work with. Why don't you share some perspectives on what attracted you to this idea of co-developing a new politics as part of the LiFT team? And why do you think we need this today?
So my history or background is that I was part of a political think tank for 15 years, but I'm also a psychotherapist and I'm a consultant on something called soft power. So while I was part of this think tank, which was broadly the progressive left, I had a lot of questions that I wanted to bring into our discussions that I felt were not really being called for. If I did bring them in, I didn't really get much engagement. And in the UK, you're probably aware, we had this important moment with Brexit, when I decided this is the evidence in a way when Joe Cox was murdered, that we needed an alternative to the current political system. which is why I broke off to do the Alternative UK, which is a political platform. And the very first question we asked ourselves was, what is the human being at the heart of politics? And if the old politics, it was very much homo economicus, about material needs and the importance of getting a roof over your head and a job and a tax cut. We wanted to start in a completely new place, which is what we consider the biopsychosocial spiritual entity that is a human being, and what kind of politics can arise from that. And I would have thought that's exactly the reason why we're in this project, because I think that's the starting point that we can share, and we can have these great discussions here that I couldn't have before.
Yes, Indra, and I remember when we first met to discuss your role in the project, you said that what you're doing at the Alternative UK is actually LiFT's work, and that's true. So we're extremely glad to have you here with us.
Yeah, I think that for me, the project is really important because climate change, which I've been working with for more than 30 years, is so much more than just an environmental problem. It really is a social issue, it's a human issue, and it's very political. And if we're going to really address it, we're going to have to really take a wider and a deeper approach that is going to have to really kind of reinvent politics as we know it, and especially the idea of political agency. And I think that that's where, getting people to really believe, understand that we matter in terms of, how we've organized society collectively, how we relate to nature, and how we relate to the future. And I think it's very exciting then to be able to think about that there are alternatives that exist, there are other possibilities, and like the quantum metaphors and meanings and even methods really open up a whole different view on potentiality and what is possible, and that, like entanglement and non-locality, and that these relationships, it's not so hierarchical and top down, bottom up as we've been led to believe, but that each of us is in relation and interacting and making a difference all the time. So I think that there's a lot of different perspectives and different ways of approaching transformative change, and LiFT Politics is kind of lifting the conversation.
Yeah, nice metaphor. Yeah, so that's something great that you both bring in. And to those who watch this video, you see that in this video we show up in changing constellations all the time, and that's actually also how we operate in this project a lot. Wherever partners see synergies between what some of them do, they just go ahead and explore them more. And I wonder whether the two of you, Indra and Karen, you have had an experience of that as well. If you want to share a bit, what's your relationship with each other in this project, and what are the things you're currently working on?
Well,
some of the things.
I could, yeah. So I could pick up a little bit on what Karen was just talking about, because we both share a focus on the question of agency, and that is both personal human agency, but also collective agency. And one of the, sort of myths, if you like, of the old politics that we are constantly creating evidence, and trying to debunk, is this separation between the idea of an individual, the social setting, and the globe that it has an impact on. The old politics tends to separate these things out and calls people either individualists or socialists or globalists. And what we're trying to draw attention to is how any human being can be, self-driven and autonomous, but still have a completely social way of operating. So an interest in the whole self includes an interest in the society that you're participating with, and always has a global impact. And from a spiritual point of view, that's like the three realms of a human being, and there's no need to separate them. We all have capability in all of those things. So I think one of the things that Karen and I have been talking about is, where does that become possible? And what is the impact, not so much of people following necessarily political projects or policy, but what is the impact of human beings coming into contact with each other and having relationship and building trust, what is the wider impact of that on society and on the globe, which is a new kind of politics altogether, not one that is party-led. Does that make sense to you, Karen?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, in your new book on the politics of waking up, you talk about fractal politics, which really resonates with this approach that we're constantly generating new patterns and new relationships that really are, you know, depending on the values that are really behind them, they scale at all levels. So we have to go beyond just thinking like, oh, I don't matter, I can only influence this, but recognizing that we have, you know, this real, our sphere of influence is so much wider than we believe. And, you know, when we look at the old politics, I think we really are underestimating our collective capacity for social change. And that, I think, is where it becomes really exciting at this point, because we really do need to activate that collective agency, individual agency, political agency at a rate, scale, speed, and depth that has not been done before. So.
And I wonder, Indra, would you like to share a bit more about this sub-project that you're in charge of, the landscape of pioneers?
One of the key facts that we uncovered when we started the alternative is that only 2% of people are members of political parties. And that 2% is creating the political discourse that we're all familiar with, that the media feeds on, in which there is quite a big message that people are powerless. And our intention from the start was to go into the 98% to find those people and to reimagine people as the source of power for not only a new politics, but for how change can happen. In Karen's book, You Matter More Than You Think, is almost like the message that we want to give almost every person that we meet in our political work, because every one of them, particularly those that have not been really recognized by old politics as having agency, are the very people that are missing from the bigger picture and the science really of how things can change. So this new intelligence coming into the political discourse is the key to us being able to answer the problems we couldn't answer before. So from the point of view of the pioneers of politics, you won't find us necessarily talking to politicians or policymakers. You'll find us talking to people who are starting either community initiatives, or they may be artists, or they may be scientists, in fact, but people who are not necessarily traditionally connected with politics, for us, are the starters of a new politics. And many of them also young people who are born into this as digital natives with a very different view of what the globe is. Their ability to roam around the globe and be cosmo-local in everything that they're doing is key to our new politics.
Great, yes. And if you want to see more of these pioneers of politics, please check out upcoming videos on this channel. And there are also some online on Indra's channels beyond the LiFT project, of course, but we'll be posting quite a couple of these as we go. So thanks very much to the two of you.
Thank you.
And I'd like to pick up two things that Indra has mentioned in relation to the pioneers of the new politics. First, that they are bringing in a new kind of intelligence from beyond politics as usual, as cosmo-local pioneers in various areas. And second, that many of them are young people with their own very specific views and understandings of what's going on. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our Austrian partner, Harald Schellander from Institute for Future Competences in Carinthia, who is the initiator of a festival called the Days of the Future that has now been running for over 10 years. And you're also offering a training course together with your business partner, Cornelia Scala-Hausmann, a course on future competences. And you are doing amazing work with young people in this area. So Harald, how has the LiFT project influenced your work in this area, in the area of a new politics?
Much more than I thought at the beginning, because my project is for LiFT to make interviews with German-speaking pioneers. And I thought, oh, that's a great job just doing on Zoom and meeting interesting people and so on. And as we are doing this together with Indra, I got much more global perspective in doing it with Indra. It's the first thing. And the second is that we as institute and team in future competences are now much more than a platform we have formerly been, because we started right now in this year a project called Roundtable for Municipalities. And this is a format of dialogue where we go into municipalities and meet citizens there and bring them together on the table and offering and opening a form of dialogue. And the first dialogue in this form will start in 2 weeks. And we are very excited how it will work, because this is new for us, going out, not in a safe space as we do normally in our Days of Future with invited people and invited projects, but now opening up for everybody who is living in this community with mostly people we don't even know, and seeing what's coming up in a very open format where nothing has to go to a goal or so, or to a, we don't have to find next steps or so, but we just see what are the informations or the presentations who are coming up from the moment, and hopefully coming up from the heart, also speaking from the heart.
Wow. And all of this has happened during Corona. That's fantastic. So that's one of the very interesting, fascinating synergies that have occurred during the LiFT project's first half of existence. So as you mentioned already, that you're in charge together with Indra Adnan to coordinate the exploration of political pioneers with a particular focus on German-speaking pioneers. So can you just share a little bit more about what kind of pioneers you've come across so far? And what do you think makes them pioneers of a new politics?
Mm-hmm. We have a great panorama from different perspectives. And it's interesting is that some of the pioneers we have interviewed wouldn't have said that they are political pioneers, because still it's connected to a party. You are a politician if you're a member of a party. And what we see is that just starting in your neighborhood or in your municipality and bringing something out in an open space, in an open area, is also a very strong activity, yeah, and open up the minds of a lot of people. So we, for instance, have Claudia Döring. She's from Munich and opened a living room on a street in a quarter of Munich. And in this street, they are talking together what could happen in this quarter to make it more
more alive.
Thank you. Yeah. And he's doing it with in the background with spiral dynamics, what's very common for us in this integral sector. And on the other hand, for instance, there is Roland Jaritz here from Carinthia, just neighbor for me. And he's starting a small political movement for a city, for Klagenfurt. And he went for the first elections there, didn't
Succeed.
proceed to the municipalities, but just starting it and showing others how it could work to bring more citizens' participation in the city, and going on with it, even if they have no mandate in the city council, would change something. Yeah, and he's doing citizens convents all over Austria, and has a lot of good examples how it may work. For instance, in Graz, which is the second biggest city in Austria. And so Indra said we wouldn't have talked to real politicians. We did, or I did, because I found that in Wuppertal, in a German city with about 350 inhabitants, there just is a new mayor, Uwe Schneiderwind, and he's just a crossover, so to say, coming from science. He was the leader of the Wuppertal Institute, which is a big sustainability think tank, not only in Germany, but I think for whole Europe. And he changed from these think tank into this mayor work. And it's interesting to see how a Wissenschaftler,
Scientist,
how a scientist is going to start a work for a big community,
and brings in his mindset of a scientist, looking from a very hands-on perspective onto politics and reorganizing the city.
Reorganizing it, and so being in the middle of Corona and having huge problems there, in his first 100 days, he talked to a lot of people and presented his future work, his future concept.
And I think you call him an artist of the future in your interview.
An artist of the future because he wrote a book about this. It wasn't my intervention.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you, Harald. And for those of you who can speak or understand German, you will find the original interviews on our Pioneers of Politics channel, on the German version of the channel. And those 3 ones that Harald has just mentioned will be there as well. So thanks very much, Harald, and see you again later on this series.
Thank you so much.
Another couple of powerful female thought leaders and expertise are coming into the project with Anne Kaspari and Beth Smith. Anne Kaspari is an old friend and colleague of ours working on leadership development and complex adaptive systems. And Beth works with Anna and Dave Snowden and brings in the expertise and experience of the Cynefin Center, which is also an associate partner of LiFT. And so, as with all the previous partners, why don't you start briefly introducing yourself and what attracted you to the idea of lifting politics up to a new level? So maybe Anne, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, right. Old colleague, I was part of the first LiFT project some years ago, and I've been in the integral community since 2004. Very, very intensively studying integral theory, also in the States, in the US, and on the sustainability side of things. So I'm very interested in the whole area of societal change. I studied nature conservation and I'm an environmental planner by training. So that's very close to my heart, you know, what society is all about and where are we going collectively and what better games can we play out there. So being very involved in adult development and developmental methods. I'm now switched to being a full-time consultant and coach into these areas of transformation and change, and with adult development and leadership development. I found years ago that for me that wasn't enough, or there was some blind spots in that whole developmental agenda, also with the integral applications, let's say. So 6 years ago, I stumbled over Dave Snowden's work, and for me that was the missing piece in saying, hey, we don't need to go about changing the world one consciousness at the time, but can actually work with collectors if we work in a different way. And that different way was grounded in how people think, cognitive science, and in complexity theory. And I was hooked ever since, and then stumbled across a SenseMaker that can bring in people and people's contributions at the very level they're at, and not saying, yeah, you need to do trainings in order to be at a certain level. And I was like thoroughly relieved and saying, yes, this is exactly what I want. And while still working in adult development parallel, you know, it's like with leadership training, we can do different projects that pull in, that answer for me that problem of time and the problem of scaling that the other approaches don't answer for me. So this is when the collaborations with Dave Snowden and also in that wake Beth started, and we're going strong ever since, and on many different fronts, and that's fantastic. Over to you, Beth.
Hello, I'm Beth. I'm currently working with the Knevin Centre. I think what really drew me to LiFT is in my previous role, I'd worked as a policy advisor to the Future Generations Commissioner of Wales, which is an institution as a piece of legislation looks at shifting the entire system around how public decisions are made and what is taken into account when those decisions are made. And so recognizing that the interrelatedness between the multiplicities and everything that's going on around us, and making sure that all of those different aspects are represented in decision making and they're understood from different people's points of view. I always say what's normal to the spider is chaos to the fly. So actually by understanding that by doing a single action could have a whole different load of knock-on effects to different people. And so for me, my role there actually as a policy advisor was specifically around involvement and democratic innovation. So how can we use new and different ways to actually make sure that those different experiences and voices are represented? And actually, whilst I was working there, we always used to have a saying, if you don't have a seat at the table, the likelihood is you're on the menu. Actually, how can we ensure that everybody has the opportunity to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made in a more inclusive fashion? So for me, that was really actually how SenseMaker and the Knevin Centre's work came into play here. So how can we hear from people where they are at? It's about institutions being more open to listening as opposed to consulting and pushing agendas for other people to consume, but actually how can they be an awful lot more receptive? And for me, that the key thing is here this shift of who defines what that story means. And so if I want to share my opinion, my experience from my grounded point of view, that should be for me to decide, you know, what interpretations I make of that, not for some policy professional who's never lived a day in my life. So actually looking at the fundamental shift in power of knowledge creation and democratization. And I think that's kind of what I bring to LiFT and hopefully what I hope to explore further throughout the LiFT partnership.
Wow, thank you. That is already really getting us into the content as well, because you've already been mentioning sense making and SenseMaker and what it can do. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little more on what that is, the SenseMaker, It's one very interesting digital tool, just so people can get an idea of what you're talking about. I mean, very briefly, if you can. I know we can talk for a long time about it.
I'm happy to talk about SenseMaker as the tool and allow Anne to talk about sense making.
Very good.
So SenseMaker as a tool works as a way for distributing how we make sense of the world. So by each person unpicking their part of the jigsaw and collecting stories or photographs or anecdotes of how people experience or see the world, and then asking those individual people to make sense of those things through a series of questions and metrics to break things down. And that basically allows us to get an understanding of both the stories and the statistics behind the patterns that are at play kind of at large. So we can look at individual responses, but also aggregate that up to look at the kind of meta level or collectively held beliefs and experiences. And then we'd start to host sense-making workshops to look at how do we collectively make sense of what we've unraveled here. So Anne, you can probably talk to that.
Yeah, and I mean, it would be great to hear a little bit about, you have developed a number of so-called captures, and maybe Anna, if you could say something about the topics and what you addressed and where we're at the moment in the LiFT project on that.
Yeah, we have been working with the SenseMaker for years now, and that's exactly that tool that for me was missing, to ask people their stories, what they bring to the table. And if you have these water cooler or coffee maker stories, they're so rich, they're fragments, but they're pointing to something systemic. Yeah, and if you collect them in a way that is as close to unbiased as you can, you have really, really rich data that you can work with. What's more is you can collect these stories and then, as Beth already said, you can have a look. So what can we do already tomorrow to have less stories like those and more like these, and pointing into a more generative direction? And for me, that is a completely different model of change. Yeah, in my profession, change is often completely misunderstood or not understood at all. It's not a thing. It's not a concreteness. So. Yeah, you often ask, can you come into our company and change the mindset, as if that was possible, or can you change something, with COVID and everything? Can you change that direction? How can we work with that community? Meaning, how can we change them? And the SenseMaker is, as Beth pointed out, completely taking it the other way around, democratizing that process and asking people their contribution and helping them make sense together of a certain given environment or culture and things. And then you have a look at what can we be done already, in an organic way to alter environments, to work with constraints, to work with more permissions here and other constraints here in order to, and then some shifts are possible. And if you then take the sum total of all micro shifts in this way, and some might be bigger, then you look back and you see, hey, the company culture or the community has changed. So I think that is revolutionary in its small step kind of way. And it's not like you change people or you change their mindset or you change a society. It cannot be done like that, like it was a mechanistic thing. And this going about change in a completely more organic way, more like, a different thing. And that is grounded in that complexity. We have worked with companies like IKEA for the last 4 years. They have applied that. In a company, we have also worked with NGOs or with universities. We've done not only LiFT, but also work with the University of Oslo, where we have a capture going on. They have another EU project called SIAS, It's called, I have to have a look because it's complicated, Science Education for Action and Engagement Towards Sustainability. And they're having a look how young people in school are, if sustainability and climate change are an issue for them at all or not. Yeah, and if so, what is on their mind? Are they frustrated? Are they optimistic? And what are the stories the young people tell? And we also have other European projects where, for example, Carsten comes in.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a beautiful segue into a very specific capture that you have developed, and which has also got quite some traction over the last week, because it's related to the conference on the future of Europe, which has been launched just recently by the EU institutions. And that's why I'm really, really pleased to have also with us today Carsten Berg from our partner in the LiFT project ECI campaign, which stands for European Citizens Initiative. And I know, Carsten, you have been into democracy work for really a long time. So what are your thoughts on it? And maybe you can just present yourself also just a little bit, and then, yeah, maybe we can have a little conversation around this future, the conference on the future of Europe.
Yeah, the conference on the future of Europe was just launched on Europe Day yesterday, on the 9th of May. And this is, I think, an important moment also for the LiFT project. Talking about myself, I'm working on democratic innovations now for many years, nearly 20 years, or more than 20 years actually, starting in the Convention on the Future of Europe. That was the Constitutional Convention on the Future of Europe, 2001 and 2, sorry, where we, together with my colleagues, I was collecting the signatures to introduce the European Citizens Initiative right, which is the very first and only instrument of transnational participatory democracy, which has an article in the EU treaty now for the very first time. So it is something institutionalized, available, something we can really use and further develop. And today, today I'm giving advice to ongoing European citizens initiatives, how to prepare this huge exercise to collect 1 million signatures. And we also work with the EU institutions to develop the ECI further, because democracy is never an end. I think we constantly need to develop it further. And now we have seen, just thanks to Anna and Beth, that there are completely different methods available. And we also work on additional other democratic innovations and methods, such as randomly selected citizens assemblies, and also look into the different countries, like in Europe as such, where we also have forms of really binding forms of decision makings through citizens initiated referendums and so on. There's a lot to learn, and we want to bring this together in order to co-create our public space and democracy as such, also in the European Union.
Thank you, Carsten. And would you have anything specific maybe also to say about the SenseMaker capture that you were able to do?
Well, this is still ongoing. So far we have more than 1,000 participants already. And here it is very good to first say that we have co-created. By the way, we are constantly working within our organization in co-creating processes. And one of the recent co-created coalition projects, it's called Citizenstakeover Eu. And this is a coalition of more than 50 NGOs like Democracy International, Pulse of Europe, many more, Mehr Demokratie, and so on, and also our ECI organization. And so we are constantly growing coalition, all working to transform the European Union, as President Macron said yesterday here in Strasbourg, very close to where I live, that we need a new renewal of democracy. And we as civil society organizations contribute our part to that. And often, since we are so diverse in Europe, there's so many countries, languages, and individuals, most of all, we wanted to also know our own positions and what our own emotions and rational expectations are on the conference. And for this, we were also actually doing a capture or a sense maker on the future of Europe and the conference on the future of Europe as such. And what I think is very important from my point of view is that this kind of survey is not just a fixed one, but it is open. Yeah? It reveals individual stories. It reveals qualitative data and quantitative data at the same time. You can bring this together. And I would love to see the results or the method also being applied in the conference on the future of Europe. And so far, as there we for the very first time have systematic, randomly selected citizens assemblies. They are called citizens panels here. And the question is, how do you, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this principle, these are randomly selected citizens based on socio-demographic variables so that they reflect the European society as a microcosm, so to say. And these people then elaborate concrete recommendations. And the question is, how do you draw this sample? Yeah, and classically you have these socio-demographic variables, age, geographic diversity, gender, and so on, income, education status, and so on. But often you don't have what is very important, different attitudes. Yeah? And what we find out with this capture here right now is also different attitudes towards the European Union, like Europhiles who say, yes, Europe is great, and so on. And others who say maybe, oh yeah, I like it, but I'm a bit more critical and I would like to see decisions taken much more at the national level, for example. And with these diverse questions, you can find out different attitudes. And that will be very important to also be applied in the conference on the future of Europe. And that is currently being discussed, and we are in touch with those professional organizations implementing the citizens panels for the European Commission.
Thank you. Maybe Anna and Beth, would you just briefly like to comment on this, or some thoughts that came up during the presentation?
Yes, particularly my involvement, having worked with Carsten and his group, that we kind of co-developed the questions that we were asking. And I think that it opened up a lot of people's minds as to how we can ask questions differently, and how we can get a richer, more colourful set of data to look at. So the one question that's really struck me throughout the process is that we've encouraged people to think of a metaphor or a simile as to how they relate to the European Union. So we've proposed that the sentence, the European Union for me is like ... and encourage people to finish the sentence, and just the different level of thinking and creativity that seems to evoke, and the types of data and things that we see that come along with it kind of gives you a greater understanding of its systematic place. It's not as to say whether something's good or whether something's bad, but it gives you a lot more of that nuance and that very difficult to traditionally measure type response and sentiment, which I think is really exciting, particularly as the data set begins to grow. That you can see all kinds of nuance and how it all tangles together. But you can also see where you've got kind of really common sentiment that keeps reoccurring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll also comment on that same phenomenon that Beth talks about, or what Carsten also already mentions, is that you can draw on, you see at the collective level, you start seeing trends or clusters or outliers that you can have a look at if there's a common theme underneath, or 100 voices, 200 voices, 1,000 voices complaining about a similar thing, and you can see where this points to collectively or systemically. And the other thing that Beth mentioned is this very powerful process, and that it's not so much about the tool, but it is about the sense making it allows, and that sense making kicks in the moment you start talking about how to put the question, how to design that. The metaphor, what's already in the group, and we see that time and again with clients. The moment we saying, so what is it you want to know or probe for in your own system, that sense making starts there. And it's not just delivered by a tool and packaged nicely. It's a whole process of asking the right question, asking it more diversified from different perspectives, and then diving in, then getting the data. But it's an ongoing process behind the scenes and before the scenes. So this is one of the reasons why it's so rich, and we're so enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, it was really a process developing this capture. Sensemaker. I'm very thankful to you both again, especially to Beth, we've been participating in many of our meetings, and we are still in the middle of the process. So I'm really curious what comes out.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karsten. I think that was a kind of a closing sentence from your side. And I would also just like to point out another very important element that Beth and Anne in particular have been bringing also alongside also other partners, but which is really their skill to, you know, work with a team to address shadows, elephants in the room, process tensions, which I think are inevitable when you start to work as a team together, and then you start to get more serious and more real in your cooperation. And this is so valuable to have these kind of partners that have the skill and the dedication to work with that. And that has, I think, brought the LiFT team a lot further and together, and made a real difference. So thank you very much.
Yes, and I also wish to thank you, Bettina, for conducting this last conversation with Anne, Beth, and Karsten, but also for the great cooperation beyond that. It's such a great pleasure to work and to co-create with you and the whole team, of course, all along. And to close this video introduction to LiFT's work on uplifting politics to a new, more integral level, I'd like to pick up on the last thing that Bettina has just mentioned, namely the importance to get more serious and more real in the ways that we cooperate and that we address the things we do, which usually means to show up more honestly, more ourselves. And sometimes this also means that we first have to build the trust that is needed for people to show up and to get in touch with each other beyond any protective masks and role plays. And we found that this is also one of the most important ingredients for what we speak of as making politics and democracy more alive again, so to speak. So if you want to learn more about LiFT, please check out the description below this video. And by the way, you can also participate actively in co-creating the new integral paradigm of doing politics, and that's via our interactive surveys or immediately at our co-creative events. We'd love you to do that and to have you be part of the process. So stay tuned, subscribe to our channel, and we look forward to see you either at our upcoming Pioneers of Politics YouTube premieres or at one of our live meetings. So take care and let's be the change.